yeah, I always end up building way too many slides for these types of things. I want to give away as much as possible. But the reality is we'll take a break, and if nobody has a ton of questions, then I can dive right back into it so that you guys get, yeah, the max of what you're looking for. So there's a lot of practical stuff in here. I try to hit a little bit of everything to make sure that everybody comes away with something they can immediately use. This is coming from my 13 years of digital marketing, startup foundations, and yeah, about a million other things. So just so you get a feel for who I am, I currently run a handful of companies. So I'm the CEO of Clint Marketing. Clint Marketing is a growth hacking / creative agency. We work with clients all over the world, mostly US and Europe, but I'm always flexible and open to different things. I run Architecture Quotes. Architecture Quote is a startup, so I'm just like you guys. I've been building something for 2.5 years. It's been quite a journey, and it's basically a SaaS platform to help architects discover new and interesting projects and then automate proposals using machine learning. The last little thing that I do is called Growth Secrets. It's an event series and also a mixed blend of online courses. And yeah, it's just like I really kind of dig doing this stuff, and you might be able to tell by my energy, I'm really into this. So the more I get in front of people, the more jazzed up I get. So it's a lot of fun for me. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to move on because there's just too much to talk about. In the last 4 years, I basically have scaled some of Denmark's fastest growing startups. You can probably tell by my accent, I'm not Danish. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and some of my biggest wins have been winning a $4.3 million government contract to help veterans and wounded warriors how to basically get back into the job force. I've run teams as small as 15, as large as 30. It's a blend of interns and all kinds of different types of characters. So I don't know, never a dull moment as far as kind of my background goes. Again, what I'm trying to do today is make sure that everybody has something they can walk away with, something they can immediately use. I'll end up showing a ton of tools throughout this. So long as you're not working at a growth hacking agency, I'm happy to share the slides and give you access to the PDF. And I'll reference a few tools that I'm not supposed to openly promote, and I can give kind of beta access to some of this stuff, especially for some of the LinkedIn automation stuff. So I'll dig into that in a little bit as well. I already have a pretty good feel for who's here. I understand it's definitely startups, and that's kind of where my background has always been. So hopefully this is kind of the perfect type of stuff for you. I realize that there's a big spectrum in terms of the types of startups out there. Some are more technical, some are more, let's just say, visionary, and hopefully there's still something in here. I realize sometimes I go a little technical, but feel free to save your questions and I'll make sure to get to them in due time. The big picture of what this all is growth hacking. Growth hacking is a really simplistic way of throwing a bullshit jargon buzzword at people. It basically just means doing the work, realistically. So like I always use the analogy, let's say your car breaks down, you got to bring it to the mechanics, and there's 2 mechanics on duty. One has dirt underneath their fingernails, and they basically have fixed every component within that automobile. The other person has read books on how to go about fixing cars, but has never gotten their hands dirty. I want the first person to fix my car because they've had the experience and they've played with the tools. Think of it more simply as, instead of a 1-for-1 approach, I want to do a 1 for 50 or 1 for 1,000 or even more. So instead of just emailing people individually in something that doesn't scale, what are processes that I can put in place in order to basically do the most with the least amount of time and money in order to get the biggest results? Because ultimately we're fighting against everybody else that's on this Zoom webinar, hopefully not for the same investor money, but we're also competing on a global scale. And in order to be better than the number 1 or even the number 10 out there, we have to find streamlined ways to replace the manual processes. And that's kind of what that's what like the last 12 years of my life, 13 years of my life has really been. In terms of understanding systems, I think a lot of people get either spooked by the idea of learning something technical or kind of draw away as soon as I start going into really technical stuff. Just think about really understanding marketing and honestly anything else as understanding one system really well. If you understand one system like content, that was what it was for me. I did video production and a lot of writing when I first kind of got into marketing. I was able to apply the learnings from building great content and start to understand how to do the other aspects of marketing. And for those that are more technical and kind of on a developer side, the first kind of coding language that maybe you got into opened up the doors to all the other things that you can now do. And so what it ultimately comes down to, speaking of doors, is priorities. What are the things that are going to either get money in the door so that you can show investors that you're worth that money, or give traction to the things that you're putting money and energy behind? That's kind of the goal of all of this, is prioritizing the stuff that actually counts. And what we often come to is this 80-20 rule. It's the Pareto Principle. It basically means that 80% of your effort is going to get 20% of those results. I've seen this countless times, especially with content, and that's where I'm going to specifically go right after this slide. It basically means that 80% of your traffic, and I've seen this with all the companies that I've touched over just the last 5-6 years, all of your efforts probably won't pan out, but for maybe a few pieces of content that pull in the lion's share of leads, opportunities, and real traction. And so that means that we have to start either looking at the way that we build our businesses in a bit smarter of a fashion, or we just need to stop and go back to a Joe job, and I think most of us probably don't want to do that. And so this was one of the really difficult things that I continued to try to put in front of founders that I was underneath for a number of years, which is the amount of time should be equated directly to the amount of opportunity that comes out of a certain task. So why in the world am I putting, I don't know, 10%, 30%, 40% of my time into publishing on LinkedIn, which has a super low impression rate and reach on company pages? Why on earth am I doing that when I'm getting most of my conversions and most of my real customers on organic? And if we think about our business as what is the thing that I can do now with the least amount of time in order to get a ton of opportunities or a ton of revenue, then you should be leaning into that. So it's just one of those things. Let's focus on like KPIs, key performance indicators, and not vanity metrics. Vanity metrics are bullshit things that don't actually mean anything. Number of impressions is not a real metric. Number of followers is not a real metric. Sales is. So we just have to keep that in mind, and it's super important. KPIs are really easy to measure for those that have been around for a little while. Of course, analytics. Interestingly enough, analytics and Search Console are merging, which I'm super excited to see, and that hasn't been the case for a while, but it allows you to track essentially where you've been or what you've done in the past and what you're going to do in the future. And by the way, if you don't know how to set these up, there's plenty of people that do. There's plenty of relatively inexperienced people that do. I run an agency that does this kind of stuff as well. Cool. So I think one of the most important things that people can easily step into that takes a little bit of time for it to mature is good content. And there's this Ron Swanson quote that I always really enjoy, which is never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing, which means do one piece of content really, really well, as opposed to a bunch of 700-word articles that nobody will ever engage with and will never read. There's so many cases of this, and my experience has shown this to be exactly the same, which is if I put in a bit of effort onto something that is exactly what people are either interested in knowing about my product or service, or the people in my space are the most frustrated with and it's relatable, often what you'll see is a huge influx of value in the form of either signups, revenue, or traffic. This is a screenshot of Dollar Shave Club. Dollar Shave Club, basically, I think somebody's unmuted. But Dollar Shave Club basically ended up getting bought out for $1 billion with a B in a matter of, I think it was 3 years. And it all kind of stemmed from this one really well managed piece of content. And there's other versions of that. I'm not encouraging people to go out and try to hit virality on the head with their first try. But here's another one. So one of the companies that I used to work with, and hopefully I'm sharing my entire screen. You guys are able to, yeah, it's my entire screen. So I was working at a company called Planday. It was hourly shift worker software, super fucking boring. But one of the competitors had this really interesting piece of content that is gigantic in terms of length, super long. But this singular piece of content ended up generating enough traffic to the point that they outranked us across the board. And for a little while, they actually had a views counter on there, and it hit 3.2 million in a matter of about a year and a half. It was a really well done, thorough, detailed piece of content that just struck a big enough swath of society. And so now they really don't have to work that hard to generate a lot more interesting traffic from other blog articles, because they had this big workhorse piece of content that did kind of all the work. Another example would be Elon Musk doesn't need a resume. We all know him as Elon, or the guy behind originally PayPal and then SpaceX and all these other, Tesla. So somebody who runs, and it's a local company out here, Novo Resume, decided to create a resume for Elon Musk. And by the way, anytime you write an article about your industry and you say, what would Elon Musk do? It immediately has a bit of traction, which is super interesting. But in any event, this thing got picked up by a number of larger publishers, Time, Business Insider, Lifehacker, and this ended up giving them so much high authority, do follow backlinks and engagement that they really didn't have to struggle beyond that to continue to scale, which was really impressive. So how does like the average startup do this? And there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this. So I would always say that the best content comes from emulating others or outright stealing it. And I'll kind of show you what I mean. So one of my favorite SEO/growth hacking blogs is Brian Dean. Brian Dean runs Backlinko, Backlinko. Can't get that out of the way. But he runs Backlinko, and basically he came up with this ideology or this thought called the skyscraper technique, which is basically taking your competitor's best piece of content, making a better, longer, more detailed, more thorough, more optimized version of it, and then outranking that competitor in their own best piece of content. It's like taking the best player from the opposing team and making him play for your team. It's really fascinating. I've made this work in the past. I've had people do this against me. It's just kind of the game that we play. So there's a number of tools and ways that we can go about doing this. And let's see if I can click through the next one. Yeah, great. So this is hrefs. Hrefs is usually $99 a month. There's different ways to kind of work through it that, we could talk about if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I get it for significantly less than that. But the idea is quite simple. You're basically looking at the pages that are accumulating the most keywords and then exporting those, or just taking a quick glance at them, and then deciding based on those, which ones do you think you would be most well suited to make a better version of it. So instead of 75 actionable SEO tips, it's 200 crucial SEO tactics. These are things that any one of us could do if we know our niche or our industry well enough, and that's where some of the best content comes from. Now, some of the other ones that are listed on here, and I'm just going to dance around for a little bit. Answer the Public is really interesting when you put kind of your industry or a keyword within your niche. Google Trends is constantly popping out with new and interesting ways of kind of looking at it. BuzzSumo works off of the most amount of engagement that a particular article has had. So there's a lot of different unique ways to really find that best piece of content. Then it becomes writing that content based off of intent. On the right side, I've actually borrowed this directly from Brian Dean from Backlinko, but it breaks down in a really coherent fashion 4 types of searches. And we want to focus on the last 2, the commercial or transactional. So I don't think people realize this, but half of all the internet searches right now end in 0 clicks because Google's answer snippets keep getting better. So if I'm looking up the capital of Denmark, I'm going to get supplied with, like an answer snippet that says Copenhagen, Denmark is the capital. I'm not going to click through on that web page in order to see more information about it because I answered my question. Navigational is much in the same way. If I'm trying to find a contact page or I'm trying to find a specific area of a website, then I don't really necessarily think that it's always one-for-one in terms of somebody thinking about buying. Commercials where it gets cool. So if somebody looks up Star Wars posters, it's probably not because they just want to spend their time staring at Star Wars posters. They're more than likely actually interested in buying. And transactional is the most interesting one, where they're actually getting at what are the price points, or what does this look like so that I can buy it? So like car insurance quotes means that they're probably looking for either a pricing calculator or something to that effect in order to get something in the way of information. New York to LA flights, the only reason that you would probably end up looking that up is if you wanted to buy. So you have to start asking your questions. What are the people that are trying to get my product or service looking up or trying to find prior to buying, at which case you need to make a guide or a listicle or some type of coherent article that gets at those purposes, and then continue to optimize as this post continues to gain traction. Now, one of the most frustrating things in the whole world is trying to explain to people that have an experience as maybe a journalist, or fuck it, maybe you did some marketing back in the 80s, I don't know. But the reality is, the longer an article is in 2020, the more likely it is to rank. And there's a number of reasons for that. You're not going to get a critical mass of information out of a 700-word article. And furthermore, if you're not going down every specific area of a particular topic, you might be losing the whole purpose of why Google is allowing you to rank in the first place. So if you look at the graph on the right, content length by shares, anything that's 3,000 to 10,000 words tends to get more shares, more engagement, and there's a whole litany of reasons behind that. On the left, it was content basically ranked by top spots. SERP IQ, I think this particular graphic is probably about 3 years old, and I imagine it's actually only gotten more drastic towards that left side of longer articles consistently rank. It's just what it is. Like there's no two ways about it. And the other side of it is, people forget, like, we search differently now than we used to. So the way that you might have bought a pair of jeans back in, I don't know, 2004, 2005, you probably did a Google search for jeans. That's not how we search today. So we'll probably put our waist size, the color, the brand, and jeans, or and denim. And so what you end up getting is this reality, which is 70% of searches are actually super long tail, meaning more than 3 to 4 words. And so if we're only going after, I am producing, I don't know, like foosball tables. If I can only rank for foosball table, and that's the only keyword that I believe I'm ever going to rank for, then I'm screwed, because you're starting so far behind everybody else. So we have to work around what is, and this is what is. So in terms of the way that you can build content without having to put tons of time and energy, is listicles. Listicles is basically the idea of a list and an article combined, and then you have a listicle. So the concept is really simple. What are things that people are looking for within your niche or situated around your potential buyers that they give a shit about enough in order to enjoy a long form list of this? I always do this whenever I enter a new company. I do the top 50 blogs within whatever the industry is that we're selling to. I do the top 100 podcasts. And sometimes I'll look at top other companies, not necessarily direct competitors, but people that are just outside of it. And if you're really focused on a super specific type of buyer, I would say it's more a B2B play, but I do 50 tools for X buyer persona, whoever that person is. This works really, really well. And by the way, you also get people to cross-pollinate and share your stuff because you mention them. And people, I think they get confused. Like, everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So if you mention somebody in a list, make sure to reach out to them. One of my favorite new tools that it's not GDPR compliant as of yet, but I think they're getting there, is Postaga. Let's see if this works. Yeah, there we go. So it's an automated promotion tool. I don't own anything in this company. I found it and I was like, oh, like totally badass. Like he's figured out something really unique here. And I would say that a tool like this allows you to reach out to everybody that you've referenced or mentioned in an article automatically, which saves, again, the manual approach. And our ultimate goal has always been what is fastest and not manual. So moving on from that, I could go into a bunch of examples, but I'm going to move on. Better titles is more of a user experience thing as opposed to anything else. I did a presentation over at Google about 2 years ago. I'm getting old. But I was asking what people were selling, and somebody in the front was like, t-shirts. So I put t-shirts into a title generator. If you do a Google search for title generator, you'll find tons and tons of them. If you're struggling with email copy or just email subject lines, do email subject line generator. My favorite one on here for a long time has been SEO Prestor, and it generates based off of kind of an equation, based off the type of word, what a cool or kind of clickbaity almost title would be. And this works really well, and anybody can do this. So if you're struggling for inspiration, the buck stops here. Get this going. Moving on. Cool. So updating old blog posts has been a really fascinating tactic that, I don't know, like we get lazy and we just continue to assume that everything's working fine and fuck it. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's probably inherently one of the worst things that you can do if you're trying to get more traffic. I'm going to try to show you guys what happened when I added 2 paragraphs to my best performing blog posts on Clint Marketing, and you can kind of see for yourselves that updating old blog posts for keywords that you've either lost or getting a little bit more in terms of bolding out of specific key phrases that you want to rank, or just adding entire paragraphs or sections to a blog post that you feel like cover the point more closely. This is analytics. I mentioned it before, but let me just show you guys over the last 30 days because I had like a really nice epiphany, and it was yeah, it was really cool to see this. And hopefully if this loads, excuse me. So last 30 days. Yeah, so this has been kind of the standard of anywhere from 200 to 300 unique visitors per day. I updated one of my most successful posts, and the ranking shot up to basically like a 300% spike. It's normalizing out, which is pretty consistent with what happens when you update posts. But I would do this with all of my best performing content because it's definitely working, and that means we're adding a mixed blend of bullet points, key phrases that are bolded, internal and external links, examples, and different forms of media, which is actually my next slide. So what does different forms of media have to do with anything? People are inherently lazy. They're super ADHD, coming from like the most ADHD guy that I know. I wrote this article on corporate innovation and included this this image of Elon Musk smoking a joint. And I thought it was actually accentuating the point that I was making, but my CEO ran up to me the next day and was like, do you think this is appropriate for an audience of corporate innovators? And my answer was, fuck yes, it is, because they're people, and people want to be delighted, entertained. They want to find some abstract way of representing what can be a really dry concept. So go for it. Add the infographic, add the GIF, add the meme, so long as it illustrates a point and it's relevant, not to just draw people away from the things that you're saying. But there's definitely a case to be made, and I've made these experiments myself. When you add more imagery, when you add embedded video, you end up getting more engagement overall within the post, and it often keeps people there for longer, which is a ranking factor, and therefore you capture more keywords over time. So the idea is put lots of stuff inside of your blog posts. Cool. So lots of quick wins and different ways to kind of start things off. If you're trying to garner some attention on LinkedIn, you're only really going to win on your personal LinkedIn page. I just don't see the volume with, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, trying to aggregate attention to company post updates. It just doesn't happen. So there's a lot of really simple ways to basically import contacts from old email addresses. I do that probably once every 3 months. It's just continuing to add connections. I would say that if I jump back to this, I've started doing a ton of automation within LinkedIn, and I'm getting mixed results. So connecting with 500 to 1,000 decision makers every week, which means like I'm actually only connecting with about 40% of those. Of those, it's definitely the people that are more interested because they've accepted a connection from a stranger. But it means that now I can start using decision trees to kind of sell, and that's where I hand things off to my interns and virtual assistants. if you want to mess around with that, it takes a little bit of time to set up. I'm happy to do it. But yeah, that's a really cool hack, and it's one of the things that's been working out really well for me. In terms of getting early traction for your startup, like you obviously have a website. It'd be weird if you didn't and you were here. So the first step is getting listed on places where people go to find things like you. So some of the different ways to do that is do a Google search for listing platforms for startups, or profile listings for startups, or do follow backlinks for startups. And you'd be surprised, you're able to generate a number of profiles fairly quickly without much work. I think winning locally is super important as well, and you will never win locally unless you register your business using Google My Business. It's so frustrating, but yeah, they send you a postcard. You basically punch in a couple of digits after you go through the initial steps, and it's there. Really easy to do. Some of the ways that I encourage people to start thinking about their keyword lists, I don't always recommend doing this super early up front because your brand, your product, your service, it might evolve, but continuing to have a running list of keywords that you eventually want to rank for as budgets start to free up and you can start throwing money and resources at building out scalable content that ranks for said keywords. It means that we need to start finding these things so that you're not struggling to put things together last minute. All of these are great little tools that allow this to work. I'd say Uber Suggest is Neil Patel's tool, and a lot of people are super familiar with it. My favorite is probably Surfer or Keyword Tool. Hands down, hrefs is the best tool, but again, it's a paid resource. And I'll show you what this looks like because this often saves like countless hours. So like, let's say it's video game network. So like, I don't know, one of the companies that I'm consulting with and kind of helping as a mentor is Gaming Buddy. And you can see that the related keywords are down on the right side, but more interestingly, I actually can see the posts that are ranked number 1 through number, whatever, are actually either not doing as hot as they should be or only really garnering a little bit of attention. So if a ton of people are actually searching for this particular key phrase and it doesn't seem like they are, then I would stand a much higher chance of actually outranking the biggest competitors here on this list. Alternatively, I might just want to capture these, copy, paste, and make sure that I'm looking them up individually. I can go into some of that stuff later if people are really interested, but I don't know, I like nerding out on SEO. It's kind of my favorite stuff. So what I'll end up doing, especially with like my clients, is building kind of a stoplight technique of deciding whether or not it's worth even trying to go after certain keywords. So red is like hard, it's not going to happen. Yellow is like, we could do this. Like, I mean, it's going to take some work. And then green is like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's start doing this. I always kind of use this across Google Sheets because it's so easy to make sure that I'm staying organized and prioritize stuff. Really helpful. So once I start building out long form content, I always make it into a downloadable. If you ever have any ambitions on putting out paid content, this is really your cornerstone, which is just repurpose the blog that's proven itself to be the most valuable thing that you've created so far, put a cover on it, and either allow people to click through and just get to your blog post, or put it in a template. So Envato, I don't know if anybody knows Envato, elements.envato.com is a great little place where you can get all of these ebook templates, and then you need to use a conversion tool that allows you to capture an email in exchange for this template that basically is just repurposed blog content. I know I'm moving really fast, but I'm kind of limited on time here. So I think everybody's kind of familiar with MailChimp. Convertful is probably one of my favorites. Hello Bar is interesting as well. There's tons of different tools out there to do this, but the whole purpose is, let's say you make like an awesome blog article and it fucking kills, and there's tons of people coming to this page, but if you're not capturing them, if you don't have, let's say, the Facebook tracking pixel, or not able to pair up these audiences, then that's out. If you're not capturing their email, then how are you supposed to put them in a funnel to remind you that you have a fucking awesome product or service and they need to come back and buy from you? And the answer is you won't unless you capture it. This is why exit pop-ups have exploded. This is why people are always trying to find new ways to shield parts of their content in order to get somebody to put in an email address in the hopes that they'll be able to follow up later. And there's tons of tools that are constantly coming online that do a great job of this. I'm really frustrated with the shitheads over at HubSpot. I tried working on a partnership, didn't pan out. It's not a bad tool, it's just wildly overpriced. And I think most of the time you can find something that would do a much better job. No offense if anybody's like in love with HubSpot. Exit pop-ups work, I already kind of mentioned that. My favorite one is down here on the bottom right. So not ready to sign up today, enter your email, we'll send you a surprise. And then there's a monkey emoji. I actually converted on this, so I'm like, oh, what's the surprise? Like, it's gotta be something interesting. So these are fun little clever tactics that anybody could use right away. And many of these tools are actually freemium. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to really scale this up. As I mentioned before, the one that was on the bottom, Hello Bar, is a great little tool that does that. Unbounce is wildly overpriced, but there's tons of tools. If you look up exit pop-up software, you'll be able to find like tons. One of like the easiest things that I think I still got plenty of time. Yeah, I do. One of the easiest things that anybody can do right now is figure out what is not working on their site. And there are so many free little tools that you don't have to even sign up for. Some you have to at least just give them your email, Chalker. And it will tell you the big things that aren't working. So if you don't have a sitemap, you're kind of screwing yourself. If, I don't know, you have too many H1 tags, there's only one H1 tag per page. There's a million different things that go into it. But ultimately what SEO has kind of come down to is speed. So if your website loads in the span of more than 3 seconds, you're basically going to be obscured from Google's search engine results pages, or SERP. It's just because Google wants to do this whole mobile first, give people a chance to actually see your site, and if it takes 30 seconds on mobile for your web page to load, what's the purpose? They're going to give a bad user experience, and ultimately it's not helping anybody. So that means that if you're driving people to your website, even with ads, you need to make sure that those pages are optimized. The load speed needs to be under 2.5 seconds or at 2.5. And in terms of the size, it needs to be 3 megabytes or less, which can be really difficult for some people. And there's different ways to do that. You want to make sure, I think the most common thing is just like uncompressed images, where it's like, what the fuck, guys? Like, this is like the easiest thing ever. So the tools on the right side are the like really easy ones. Top 2 are definitely for WordPress. Kraken's a really gimmicky, easy one. For those that are working with AWS, Cloudflare, CloudFront, both really, yeah, like you need a content delivery network, or what they call a CDN, and it's really easy to implement. You can find somebody off of Upwork that can get you set up on that for, I don't know, like 12 bucks, something like that. Shouldn't be too much work, but saving yourself the time, energy, anguish of having a website that's too slow to get any traffic is the difference between a business that scales and one that doesn't. Cool. Last thing that I'll go over before I pause maybe for questions, or maybe I'll hit a couple more things, is making sure that you have a list of competitors that you're able to examine with regularity. I always get some of my biggest inspiration, or some of the most unique ways of trying to kind of target different types of users by seeing how my competitors are selling themselves, seeing what types of onboarding they're doing, what kinds of content they put out, if they have some type of new tracking tool. There's so many different ways for me to go about doing this. And so if I'm not looking at my competitors, then I'm not staying focused. I'm definitely not staying ahead. And so any one of the tools on the right are exceptional for doing this. SEMrush is free with a couple of searches per day. SpyFu's all right. SimilarWeb's okay. But you should know who you're competing against and understand kind of what they're capable of doing. If you're in more of a spending kind of circumstance and you're doing some paid ads, Big Spy has been my favorite for getting inspiration for a while. If it's search ads, so people are doing Google ads, you can see on the upper right, I'm able to see the exact text and URL structure of all of my competitors. And this is super interesting because if they have a really successful search ad campaign and I'm willing to spend a little bit of money, I can just outbid them and use the exact same ad copy, but just swap in my name. There is no such thing as plagiarism or duplicate content when it comes to paid ads, especially within Google Ads. So nice little opportunity there. Yeah, you can go into individual Facebook pages and look at their transparency within ads. I just think Big Spy is really interesting in terms of like filtering and stuff, and it allows for different platforms at once. Cool. Last thing that I'll touch before I take a little pause for for water and for questions, because again, I know I go fast. I think outbound is one of those things where everything old is new again. And so my biggest focus, especially when working with clients under my company, Clint Marketing, is to try to find a way to systematize everything. So systematizing means like I don't want to put in more than half a calorie than I have to in order to streamline the targeting. So finding the right people, discovery of their email addresses, validating those email addresses, which is often overlooked, and then an outreach that's sequenced and also original. So real quick, there's a ton of tools in this. By the way, if you're like trying to write all this stuff down really fast, like, good luck, but I'll make sure to send you my slides if you connect on LinkedIn, and happy to help to a degree. But yeah, so there's a big difference between top down and bottom up. For some reason, everybody has this asinine idea that like the CEO, that's the only person that's ever going to buy from us. And it's like, no, and generally that's actually not how it works. If you can think back to maybe when you had a Joe job or when you were working in a different or a larger size company, often it was somebody on a managerial level that brought it up to a director who then brought it to leadership. It's almost always a middle up or bottom up type thing. And I've definitely seen that with the ways that I've connected with tons of people using LinkedIn automation and a few different things. But testing these hypotheses out is where it's all at. And so building lists that are structured is super helpful, and that's how you are able to uncover this is the right messaging for the right group within the right industry, and then just turn up, the the spend on either outbound or discovery. So these are a ton of different tools down on the right side that do discovery. I've used all of these at scale. I don't know, it's really easy to find email addresses these days. I think the downside is that, like, you think of these unintended consequences of like COVID-19. A lot of people have switched jobs. A lot of people have left, and most of these databases are unfortunately like they're not updating their shit. So I used to scrape like Angel.co and Crunchbase, and I realized very quickly that nobody goes in to remove their startup because they're kind of bummed out about the startup going away. So you need to make sure that your data is actually like strong and it's coming from a place that regularly updates. Or you need to make sure that you're using one of the many tools that allow you to validate emails, meaning this service should be able to tell you whether or not this email address is still in use. That way you don't get a ton of bounces and you don't end up burning out your domain, and so that everything in the future that you send out doesn't end up in the spam folder. I personally buy burner domains, usually 3 to 4 per client. Burner domains are basically a domain that's similar, close enough to what you're currently operating on. But if I have, let's say, clintmarketing.co gets burnt up, and burnt up meaning I have sent thousands of emails through this, and Google is eventually queued in to say any Gmail account that receives or Outlook account that receives an email from clintmarketing.co, that's going to go in the spam folder. I need to avoid that, so I buy up lots of them, and I never shoot stuff directly out of my own email address unless it's a one-for-one thing and I've already like made sure to talk with these people. It's really easy to do, or again, work with an agency like mine that does. So outreach sequence is like really interesting. I've done this for a couple of startups in terms of investment. And I think there's so much in personalization that you can really play with there. The leaders within this pack are probably going to be Snovio or Lemlist. Woodpecker, I would say, is a little pricier, but it still does all the same stuff, and some of their features are really nice. But the concept is we can send out 3 emails sequentially, and based on the interaction with that email, we can send off a different follow-up. So it turns into kind of this Christmas tree of different ways in which people are engaging with my emails, So open rate clicks or clicking a specific link gets a certain type of email and response. So it's like decision tree style stuff. And ultimately, this allows me to get a lot more specialized, a lot more personalized with my my emails, my follow-ups, but it also means I don't have to do my follow-ups. They automatically go out. So again, it's that 1 for 50 or 1 for 1,000 approach. Some of the stuff that I've gotten a fair bit of traction on is what you can see up on the upper right. This is taken directly from Lemlist, and it uses a merge field over top of an image. That in and of itself, people are like, oh my God, that's so clever. Like you I guess edited an image and asked me specifically. And it's like, no, dipshit, like it's a merge field. So that means all the first names on the lists that I've generated are getting the same thing, but they don't know that. Most people don't. And I've also used a number of different tried and tested email templates. And the one that I get so bored with that I receive probably once a month includes the picture on the bottom left here with the guy running from the hippo. And it basically is, hello, insert name. I know that we haven't talked in a little bit, and maybe that's because, 1, you're not interested in my product and you want me to leave you alone. 2, you're still trying to make a decision. We should schedule a meeting. Here's a link to my calendar. Or 3, you're being chased by a hippo and you want me to call for help. And it's like, come on, man. Like that's been around since like the 80s. Super lazy. And I think you could do so much more with personalization. I've certainly tried this myself with a number of different outreach techniques for not only potential clients, but also for investment. And it does help you stand out. Last little bit before I take a break is making sure that you're tracking things that are happening, either using a CRM or at least you're using some of the tools that are listed here in order to save you a little extra time, whether it's Calendly for booking meetings, Streak for seeing when people open up stuff, or a decent CRM. And I don't know, I actually canceled my Pipedrive account the other day, so I'm not in love with those guys either. I don't know, I hope this was helpful. I'm gonna take a quick pause to see what kind of questions are out there because I wanna be aware of everybody's time.
So thank you, Taylor. I think now you can breathe a little bit and drink some water. Actually, I received some private messages on the chat saying this guy is awesome. So thank you for your presentation. And I also already uploaded to Slack your presentation, so people will have it because I know you will want to go over it again.
It's kind of actually a growth hack to get connections on LinkedIn, but, but it's okay.
You're the expert. So we have 15 minutes for Q&A. I suggest that you will raise your hand. Christine, I see that you already raised your hand even before I said so. So go ahead, Christine, you'll be the first, and try to keep it short because I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions and we don't have a lot of time. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks so much for taking the time. This is really helpful. I'm curious how much you're doing in terms of ASO and your company. How much does your company do in terms of ASO? That's my area of need right now, so I'm curious.
Cool. So for those that don't know, ASO is App Store Optimization, and there's a ton of okay tools and wildly overpriced tools within App Store Optimization. I think the tricky thing that we have to remember, and I ran a mobile app development firm about 6 years ago. We did a mobile app for Kellogg's. And I still don't understand why a cereal brand would ever need a mobile app, but hey, we built it for them. So App Annie is probably one of the best solutions for those that are in something in the way of iOS and Android with the Play Store and the App Store. And basically it allows you to not only look up competitors, but look up what is possible for you to rank on. So if you have no idea where you're ranking for particular keywords, then you need to get in here and at least start digging around a little bit to take a look at your top keywords and figure out, do I need to pepper in more keywords? Do I need to make sure that my app experience is kind of aligned? And the app experience can be everything from the feature images to the description, but ASO is super easy. There's a ton of great like YouTube videos and stuff where people are really just using more or less a very simple tool like this to add in a few more of these intent based keywords. So the thing is, like, you got to make sure that people are into what you're selling, but I hope that helps. So are you using App Annie?
Not at this time. I'm actually looking at what's the best solution out there. I'm concerned about App Annie because I think App Annie and a number of other competitors like App Tweak, etc., they scrape the data as opposed to like a Gummy Cube. I think I'm curious if you know anything about Gummy Cube and if you would go that route or if you think App Annie is better.
Unfortunately, I haven't used them. Yeah, don't know them, but I don't know. I'm just going off of, yeah, what I've done before.
Cool.
And, you know, it's constantly evolving.
I know. Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Sure.
Sorry, I was on mute. Anyone else? I know it's a lot of information to digest, but we have 10 more minutes, and I'm sure you have some questions for Taylor.
Maybe if somebody wants me to run through a quick evaluation on hrefs, that might be helpful, or alternatively, I could show a Facebook post swap hack that is really good at getting early level engagement.
Let's go for the second one.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
No problem. So this particular post hack is really interesting, and this is a cool play for both B2C and B2B. So like it's not for one niche. The only thing that's required of this is flexible morals. I don't believe in screwing the little guy, but I do believe in gaming the system. And so there is a difference, I promise. So I would say one of the more interesting plays that's out there, depending on your product or service, is probably Phantombuster. There's also TextAU or TextAw, but I don't know, I hate that name. But these are really cool little recipes that allow you to scrape the most engaged people on a particular post. I've seen some really interesting plays with online courses for those that have been on LinkedIn pretty consistently. You'll often see that LinkedIn is pushing super heavily on their own courses. What LinkedIn has done is allow people to see everybody that's liked and commented on said courses. So that in and of itself is a custom audience that you could either target ads to because you know these people are looking for courses, or you could essentially do a long form enrichment play, which is people are looking for courses on being a coder. Maybe you're selling some type of coding solution for athletes, I have no idea. And then you're targeting these people via email by enriching their LinkedIn profiles. There's tons of stuff out there on Phantombuster. It's a little more high level, but I think it's pretty badass. I'll run through this one really quick. I've used this pretty, I don't want to say excessively, but it's a lot of fun. So the idea is I want to go to groups on Facebook and start putting out posts that actually get engagement elsewhere, and then swap out the content once it reaches a maximum threshold of 75 comments. The idea is you don't have to write any new content. You don't have to do anything new. You're just taking something that was new over here and putting it new over there and then swapping it out with something that is somewhat related that drives people to either your blog post, landing page, or whatever. So first thing I do is discover groups within my niche. Facebook groups consistently have the highest amount of engagement of any platform. They have a super high amount of impressions in terms of the way that statuses or updates within these groups hit. So you get exposed to people who are active within groups that are super active. You don't get that in LinkedIn or any other group as far as any other social media platform. So I scrape a ton of these, and I basically am putting the name and the URL, and I start using fake accounts, and again, flexible morals, to basically buy up a handful of fake Facebook accounts to be able to post at scale, because most people won't let you join if you're a member of like 150 groups, let's be honest. So the group engagement often looks a lot like this. It's always, there's a call to action or a question. There's some element of controversy. There's definitely something visual to go with the post, and memes and questions combined tend to get the highest level of engagement. Other than that, it's hustle porn, which is like, rah, rah, like, I used to be broke and now like I drive a BMW and $100 million, like, get the fuck out of my ear. Like, that's not even real. I hate those, but those don't get a ton of engagement. So I look for the posts that are getting a minimum of 100 likes, and none of these groups should be smaller than 3,000 users, by the way. So I'm looking at 100 likes, and if there's lots of comments, even better. So then I start putting all of the information for the post. So the description of the post, maybe the new description that I'm going to use, and the URL to that specific post, as well as the image linked inside of my drive. The reality is this worked really well for video for a while and doesn't work as well anymore. It definitely works for images, and that's why I would say continue to do that. So the idea is now I'm peppering these really high engagement posts from other groups into a completely different group. I'm tweaking the CTA, or I'm tweaking the ask to be relevant to whatever I want to sub in. So again, we're just remembering that we can swap things out, change the colors a little bit so nobody's the wiser. And then the last step of this is we go in, we edit the link to our article by dropping the new URL, removing the picture potentially, and then deleting, irrelevant things that don't necessarily square people off to what your article should be about. This will draw in a ton of clicks, and the way that you continue to boost it back up to the top of your group or whatever group you're in is by commenting on other people's comments, and that will continue to keep this piece relevant. And so what you can see here is this was a screen grab from this guy Nick that does the same thing, and the free Facebook traffic actually had a really strange play on organic. So Google is taking cues from social media to say if people are actually clicking through Facebook posts in order to get to your page, which was swapped out with a link that you swapped in, remember you edited that post, then let's allow this page to start ranking for some of the organic key phrases that are in there. This works really well. It is very difficult to detect. And worst case scenario, you get banned from a group because somebody's like, hey, you're not playing by like the rules. And it's like, okay, you know. But meanwhile, you have another 150 groups at your disposal. And this is a great thing that you can get interns to do. They feel like they're like little hackers and stuff. And yeah, it's really fun. I think it's worth trying out. Yeah, that's like the swap technique. And I still think I got another 6 minutes for questions if anybody has any questions.
Hey,
No! So I'll introduce him. This is our king. This is David Alwyn. He's our marketing director at Hype. And
Cool.
yeah, he listened, he joined us to listen a little bit, and he has some questions. So Bobby, go ahead.
I had to take what you did, cut it a little bit, change the URLs. No, firstly, awesome stuff. I'm really glad I joined. I've learned a lot in the past 20, 30 minutes. And for startups, growth hacking is literally invaluable. I worked previously in a product startup, and it's literally gold. So take what he said, hear it and over it and implement it. But the key is to always be learning, which is why I'm here as well. I just wanted to add to your previous slide about checking your competitors. Facebook have a Facebook ad library. So whoever your competitor is, you can go in there, type their name, and Facebook shows everything, and per company and per country. So that's just another thing that you can include there. But yeah, just wanted to say thank you and hello to all our wonderful startups.
Yeah, Facebook's gotten, awesome to meet you as well. Facebook's gotten super transparent with the different things that they're doing. So you can actually see how much money people are spending on their ads on Facebook, which should give you an indicator of like, if somebody's spending a ton of money on ads, more than likely, especially if it's an e-commerce product, means they're making a lot of money at it. So if that is an indicator, I don't know what is, of why you should start to mimic some of the most successful and high spend ads on the people that you're competing against. And again, I connect with everybody, happy to do that, but really cool to meet you, David. And I'm glad that this resonates with some people. I try to put out as much of this stuff as I can, but the crazy thing with this stuff is it evolves, and like not more than 6 months ago, you wouldn't have been able to see that stuff on Facebook. So like it's it's constantly evolving. That's kind of the fun part and also the frustrating part at the same time.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, Dovi. We have our last question from Christine, and then we need to wrap up, unfortunately.
I have one more quick question for you, Taylor. So we have a marketing team, but they struggle with growth hacking. It is just something that is not taught in school. It is something that you do and that you live it and embrace it. I'm curious what your thoughts are about small companies like mine hiring an agency or hiring a company like yours or others to do that kind of work. Is it super expensive, and is it something that we should be looking at?
Yeah, I don't know, like I could jump into a really hardcore sales pitch, but like, of course, like hire me. So like I've struggled with this myself, and I've realized with talking with other founders in the past, if I ask somebody to go to the fridge and grab me a beer, most people will stop at the front of the fridge and be like, "Oh, it's closed. I can't open it. You didn't tell me to open it." It's like, what the fuck? Like, like, come on, like the next natural step. And unfortunately, unless you have what I imagine a lot of the founders in here have, which is a innate curiosity, which is probably how you ended up on the journey that you're on, but also a desire to see things kind of next step, like you can't teach that immediately. And so it takes kind of the right mindset. It's so hard to find that. And so I would say that, yeah, it does make sense to find an agency that can help you along. It's really difficult to uncover whether or not somebody is full of shit, because we all use the same vernacular to describe the things that we do. So I can call myself a growth hacker along with the guy that just learned how to tie his shoes yesterday, and there is no discernible difference. I would say that some of the tools that I highlighted would give you a pretty good, I would say, pretty good perspective as to whether or not somebody actually knows their jams. So like if you look up on any SEO tool and they're not ranking for anything, don't take their advice. You know, if somebody has, I don't know, bad teeth, don't go to their dentist. Same thing. But there are some pretty like bald, like barbers. So like that isn't always like the same thing. I don't know. No offense, Nick, I just looked at you, but.
Okay.
But yeah, I hope that answers it.
I definitely wouldn't go to my barber's, that's for sure.
Kristen,
Okay.
I'm just going to say, join us on Thursday. I'll advertise this because we'll touch that growth hacking for small businesses and how to work the time, because it's a strangulation. It's an exercise of strangulation of time at the end of the day, especially with small startups. So using your time best, making sure they know what they're doing, and making sure you know what everyone's doing.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dovi,
great.
for that.